Good afternoon. Thank you. Wow, this is the nicest introductory welcome reception I've ever had, so thank you. I'm Christine Miller, Executive Director of the Utah State University Honors Program, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all. Students, alumni, faculty, administrators, staff, friends, community members, to the 48th Annual Honors Last Lecture. A special welcome to all of you curious students who are here today actively taking our Honors Dare to Know. So thank you for that. Each year, our students nominate professors who have made a true academic impact on their lives for the award of Honors Outstanding Professor of the Year. A committee of honors students interviews finalists and selects one exceptional professor who then imagines and delivers what might be a last lecture if that professor had only one more to give here at USU. We are so pleased today to hear from our 2023 Honors Outstanding Professor, Dr. Colin Flint, from the Department of Political Science in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. I know that every honors last lecturer is a beloved professor, and so it is important to note that this lecture today will not actually be Dr. Flint's last. We hope that he will continue talking with students and colleagues here at USU for many years to come. I'd like to extend special thanks to Jacob Sagers, the student who nominated Dr. Flint for this award, and to the students who served on the Honors Last Lecture Selection Committee. Those students were co-chairs Morgan Cole and Jackson Morley, and committee members Maggie Mace, Carly Prinster, and Jacob Sagers. I'd also like to thank the Performance Hall team and the USU Honors Program staff, especially Andy Leidolf and Jennifer Cortez, for the extensive planning and work behind the scenes that they've done to make this event today a success. Before I introduce our provost, I'd like to thank all the faculty and administrators who are joining our students here today in celebration of USU's extraordinary teaching and mentoring. Whether you're new to USU or have been here teaching for many years, I want to thank each one of you for supporting the University Honors Program and helping to make USU's classrooms some of the best in the world. It is now my great pleasure to welcome to the podium Utah State University Provost and Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Lawrence Smith.
Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone, especially Mehdi. Hey, Mehdi. It is my pleasure to be here with all of you today and help show USU's support of the 48th Annual Honors Last Lecture. The Honors Program embodies Utah State University's land-grant mission to prioritize academics, foster diversity of thought and culture, and serve the public through learning, discovery, and engagement. USU is very proud of the university's honors program, including its leadership, its faculty, and especially its students. The last lecture is the honors program's annual celebration of extraordinary teaching and research by USU's faculty. Each year, since 1976, honors students have nominated and interviewed professors who have changed their academic lives through influence and inspiration. One of those faculty is Dr. Colin Flint, who was selected by a committee of honors students to be the 2023 Honors Outstanding Professor. By tradition, the honors program has asked a student to introduce Dr. Flint. Well, that's not every year that we introduce Dr. Flint. Sorry. Who wrote this? Anyway. It is my pleasure to introduce that student, Jacob Sagers, who nominated Dr. Flint to deliver today's honors last lecture. Jacob Sagers is a junior in the honors program at Utah State University with majors in political science and French, alongside minors in data analytics and international studies. Jacob has enjoyed his time at USU and with honors, taking part in undergraduate research in Tunisia and studying abroad in France last summer. He is cementing his passion for research, global engagement, languages, and international relations through his honors capstone project, which focuses on models of democratic transition for countries within the Arab Maghreb region of northwestern Africa. Jacob plans to pursue a master's degree in applied political science in the US or France, perhaps followed by a PhD in political science. He hopes to eventually work internationally for the US State Department or a think tank or an international nonprofit organization to improve the quality of life for people worldwide. Please welcome Jacob Sagers.
Hello, everyone. This is a little out of my element, so bear with me. But thank you, Provost Smith, for introducing me, and I'm honored to be here today. I would like to welcome everyone to the 48th Annual Honors Last Lecture. It is my privilege to introduce the 2023 Honors Outstanding Professor, Dr. Flint. As a student who nominated Dr. Flint, I'm ecstatic to introduce you to this wonderful and accomplished mentor, teacher, and researcher. Colin Flint, a geographer by training, is a distinguished professor in the political science department at Utah State University. Originally from Epsom, England, he earned his bachelor's degree in geography at the University of Newcastle upon time before completing his master's degree and PhD from the University of Colorado Boulder. His research interests include geopolitics and world systems analysis. He is the author or co-author of 3 books on geopolitics and political geography, and editor emeritus of the journal Geopolitics. Outside of research, Dr. Flint enjoys traveling, spending time with his family, watching English soccer, and working with students. I first met Dr. Flint during his Introduction to Geopolitics class in spring of 2022. He came off intimidating as something he will never quite understand, or he jokes about, but I also quickly settled into his course. What struck me about Dr. Flint was his humor and ability to connect with students and make everyone feel heard as an individual. His course was also extremely engaging, incorporating traditional elements of writing and lectures with an in-class simulation of geopolitics. Ultimately, we would be split into groups representing different countries, be given background information, and work on challenges given to us throughout the semester in an engaging, collaborative, and interactive atmosphere. In this manner, I learned invaluable skills and was able to acquire a refreshing outlook on a field typically dominated by lectures and doom and gloom. Most importantly, he changed my perspective and allowed me to realize my own abilities as a student. Dr. Flint likes to speak about the need for new voices to be heard, to face and solve global problems because existing structures are not working. Essentially, we need students everywhere, including right here at Utah State University, and outside of traditionally dominant spaces, to engage with the world and society if we are to be resilient and improve. His words reassured me of my own doubts about the future and sparked me in my drive to make an impact. I am thrilled to hear from him today, and I hope you are too. It is thus my pleasure and great honor to welcome the 2023 Honors Outstanding Professor, Dr. Colin Flint.
Well, thank you very much for that very kind introduction, Jacob. I really appreciate it. Thank you, the committee, for making this grave error. I really appreciate it. So thank you very much. Thank you, Provost Smith, Dr. Miller, and the honors staff. Thanks to my wife, Dr. Colin Flint, who's always with me in these situations, and I really appreciate that. I am a first-generation scholar, first of my family to ever go to university. That carries its burdens with it as one goes through this career. So there's also another bunch of people who have helped me throughout my career, and that would be a series of British punk, post-punk, and new wave bands whose words have always been in my ears as I strive to write my lectures and write my research and carry me on. You'll see some of their words of wisdom and help as we go through this talk. So the last lecture, you have heard the format of this, and I thought to myself, well, how would I feel if I left the room without saying what I'm about to say? Words which I think might be provocative, challenging, but hopefully inspiring. Well, I would feel guilty. And thankfully, for a number of reasons, it is not my last lecture. And so it actually gives me the ability to think about this, convey this with you now, so that we don't have to wait till that day a few years away that it'll be the last lecture. We can begin now and hopefully make it an everyday practice. I'm very glad that this university has made great efforts to think about academic belonging. We're aware that this university is aware of how difficult it is to be an undergraduate student these days, aware that it is actually a struggle. As I mentioned, I am a first-generation scholar. I went to university full of the doubts of why I was there, what had happened, who had made a mistake to put me in a university. My very first day of classes, you know what it's like. You're trying to make your way around the campus, find your building, find your classroom. The first lecture I went to, I arrived, I would think, about 3 minutes late. It's one of those classrooms where the only doorway into the classroom is the one right next to the professor. I went in there, he stopped, he stared at me, so therefore the whole lecture hall stared at me. He made some sarcastic, disparaging remark, and I literally crawled to the very back of the room, sat down, I had tears in my eyes, I might even have shed a tear, and all my doubts had been reinforced, right? This had been a great error. What on earth was I doing here? This was clearly a mistake. Well, luckily, I plucked up enough courage to go to the next lecture, and that was a totally different experience. One, I got there on time, but also it was an inspirational lecture for me and actually changed my life. So I understand the struggle. I understand that we should do our utmost as a university to make you comfortable as students and belong academically. But here's the twist. I think the purpose of making you comfortable is to make you uncomfortable. That's what our goal should be, is to make you uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is that you should be comfortable enough here to rethink who you are, the society you live in, the world you live in, and how you should be and enact within it. This is my message to you. You are being weaponized. That's a take-home. You and me, all of us in this room, are parts of what has been identified as the military-industrial education complex. Now, you're probably familiar to some degree with the term military-industrial complex. It was a term coined by President Eisenhower near the end of his term. The idea that the US economy could only thrive and grow bigger by fueling the size of the American military. The idea that the American military would only grow when the US economy was focused on providing armaments for the military. That connection between economy and the military. Well, there's another element to it, and that is the military-industrial education complex. The idea that higher education in the United States of America is very much implicated in this mission. Now, that may sound radical, But actually, the person who first identified it is far from a lefty, far from a radical. It's actually Senator J. William Fulbright in 1967 who said, "In lending itself too much to the purposes of government, a university fails its higher purpose." Now, there's some interesting questions that can be generated from that quote. What is too much? Right? What is the right level of balance between a university and its mission and how it works with the government and society and informs that? When is that too much? And what is that higher purpose of a university that could be disrupted if there is, quote, too much engagement with the military? It raises these interesting questions, and we'll try and think about those a little bit today. How does that military-industrial complex manifest itself? Well, largely it manifests itself in terms of money. Research grants that go into science and engineering projects in universities such as ours with the purpose of designing new weapons that are more efficient, more effective in killing members of our own species. That's usually how this manifests itself in terms of research dollars. There's a little bit more to it than that, though. If you look at the beginning of this quote, the lettering in black, at the bottom of that, you can see it talks about money. The Department of Defense, according to the journalist Nicholas Terse, is a third largest funder of research, the money bit. But interestingly, he goes on further. It doesn't take a rocket science to figure out that the Pentagon can often dictate the sorts of research that get undertaken and the sorts that don't. What we learn, what your professors are researching, and therefore what they transfer to you in your classroom, and what they don't. And what he's referring to there is, in some ways, the way that the Department of Defense used this research leverage to dictate policies on campus, especially countering certain faculties' decisions to limit recruiting activities by the military or intelligence agencies on some campus, nixing that faculty governance. It's also a much more sort of dry aspect here is credentialing, that essentially the Department of Defense gives a seal of approval over research. Not just the research that they're funding, but then if you get that seal of approval, you can, or if you don't get that seal of approval, you can't get other types of funding research. It has a say in what gets researched, therefore what gets taught, what you engage in the classroom. So it may seem like it's distant, it may seem it's all politics, but it has a direct impact upon you in your classroom. And we have to think about what this means for our university, for USU and our USU students. So the USU is one of a bunch of institutions that are called land-grant universities, established, 160 odd years ago. And the mission of the land-grant university is set forth here, and to teach agriculture, military tactics, and the mechanic arts, as well as classical studies. So members of the working classes, somewhat of an archaic term now perhaps, could obtain a liberal, practical education. So interesting things here. Right from the outset, a university such as ours was designed to be engaged with the military. Now, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater about that, right? I have a lot of ROT students in my classes. I really enjoy working with ROT students. I'm not, going to march and ban them from university or anything like that. No, they're part of us, and that's just fine. But we may have to rethink that a little later. What's interesting here, the word working classes is very interesting to me here. As I say, it sounds a bit dated now, but what it means that our education should be accessible, right? This university should be accessible to a wide range of people. That's very important to me and the way I approach my work. But let's think about the very end here. It's very interesting to me how they put liberal and practical together, to get a liberal, practical education. If I expand that, liberal arts, social sciences, and humanities was seen at the outset as a set of practical skills, right? That learning the liberal arts, social sciences gives you a practical skill set. Now, with the new president, President Cantwell, we've been encouraged to rethink what the land-grant mission is. So part of this is going to be a rethinking of that. That's how I'll conclude my talk. And I wanted to emphasize it has a really direct impact upon you and your pathway through your degrees. In sum, what that rethinking should be, let's rethink the land-grant mission away from a national security imperative, which I'll explain what I mean by that, towards something else, that we can integrate critical thinking and empathy and a mindset of global connection across the curriculum. In other words, we can put peace across the curriculum. That would be my aim of how to rethink the land-grant mission. I'm not alone in thinking this. I can find a quote from CEOs of massive companies who promote the value of liberal, social science, humanities education. This quote from Georgia Nugent from the Council of Independent Colleges puts it very well. It's a horrible irony that the very moment the world has become more complex, we're encouraging our young people to be highly specialized in one task. We are doing a disservice to young people by telling them that life is a straight path. The liberal arts are still relevant because they prepare students to be flexible and adaptable to changing circumstances. This is something that many CEOs of even tech companies, perhaps especially tech companies, often emphasize. And what it's sort of getting at here is a focus upon what we've now become known as STEM education, right? That STEM education, as valuable as it is, again, I'm not throwing that one out either, but it can be unduly narrow. Right? And of course, that STEM education, that science, technology, engineering, filters back into that military, industrial education complex because that research money is going into weaponry as that science and engineering imperative. Again, we can reinforce this, and again, from a rather establishment figure, Lord Lansdowne, former Viceroy of India, talking in the middle of the First World War. Okay? The prostitution of science for purposes of pure destruction is not likely to stop short. In other words, this focus on science in terms of weaponry is only going to build bigger, more dangerous, more deadly weapons. That's the only outcome it's going to create. So you'll be relieved to hear this is not a research lecture, okay? Briefly, as Jacob said, my research is about geopolitics. I like to look at previous historical geopolitical contexts and think about how relevant they are today. This is the scary news. Similar historical geopolitical contexts to the one we are in today have been precursors to global war. In other words, we are in a geopolitical context which in the past has been just a few years away from global war. But this time, it will be with nuclear weapons. This time, it will be with weapons of mass destruction. So this is why I find it imperative in my last lecture to emphasize and say what I'm saying. And war is absurd, right? What a way for us to behave as a species. There could be many, many stories I could tell you about the absurdity of war. This is my current favorite I came across quite recently. Again, we were in the middle of World War I, 18 months into the First World War. Okay? It's a new type of war the world has never seen. It's a modern war. We have to fight it in different ways. And there we are in the trenches, and the adversaries, Britain and Germany, are facing each other across no man's land. To fight that war effectively, you need to see what they're doing in the other trenches. You need binoculars and field glasses to see what the enemy is doing. Who are the best producers of optics in the world at that time? It's Germany. Okay. This is also a war that requires a massive amount of people and materials to be taken from the rear lines to the front lines. You need trucks to do that. Trucks need wheels, wheels need tires, tires are made out of rubber. Who has access to the world's rubber supplies? It's Britain, with the British Empire. Britain has what Germany needs to prosecute the war. Germany has what Britain needs to prosecute the war. They cut a trade deal. They cut a trade deal to sell each other binoculars and tires. So those governments cut themselves a trade deal so that they can then send their young men into battle and continue to be slaughtered. It's absurd. It's an absurd way for us to behave. We can do better. We can rethink this. This is one quote I like to use in my classes from Marshall McLuhan. One thing about which fish know exactly nothing is water. So yes, I'm about to equate you to fish, okay? But bear with me, all right? Bear with me, okay? What this quote is trying to say is that for a fish, water is so commonplace, so obvious, so taken for granted, that the fish never think critically about it. And in a way, we are fish. We swim in a society in which we rarely think critically about the nature of that society and the way it operates. And what is that type of society, or that element of society I'd like us to concentrate on today? It's what I call the national security mindset. So let's think about that, okay? So what we got so far? Be comfortable so you can be uncomfortable. You are being weaponized, okay? 3, what is this national security mindset that underlies the military-industrial education complex? That's what we'll talk about now. So here I rely on the work of urban scholar Jane Jacobs. And Jane Jacobs likes cities, okay? She thought cities were cool. She thought that cities were really our greatest achievement as a species, as a civilization. Why? Because they were all about connectivity. They brought people together, a diverse set of people of diverse backgrounds, religions, cultures, skill sets, brought them together. And they would work together. They would see the mutuality of their skill sets. They would empathize with each other, cooperate each other in the name of commerce. Business would happen, cities would grow. She thought this was cool. What I'd like us to think about is the contrast that she saw. Not cities, but states or countries, which she saw as a very different mindset to cities. Not about connectivity, but about difference and exclusion. Not about mutuality, but creating a sense of others out there who are dangerous, who need to be kept out. Not connections, but walls. Okay? Not empathy, but fear. Not cooperation, but conflict. And that sort of idea is what drives a national security mindset. So we are, sort of to use the words of another scholar, James C. Scott, being educated and socialized to think like a state, okay? To think of a world as a world of threat, as a world of others, as a world of exclusion, as a world in which force is the ultimate solution, a world of simple binary right and wrong. This is the education process of the national security mindset. Part of it is what the scholar Donna Haraway has called the God trick. And what she means by that is the sense that those in charge of states, especially powerful ones like the United States of America, can be omniscient. They can see the world. They can understand the world. They can know the world. And with that ability, they can control the world. They can enact against the world. Now, there are many different ways that we could approach this, many more detailed concepts. The one I'm going to approach or use is this one, the domino theory, which is a theory very loosely termed, if you are aware of it. This is an idea that emerged at the beginning of the Cold War and has kind of gained a resurgence of interest, perhaps because of the name of the country on the far left of your screen. Okay. And the idea of the domino theory was that if one country went communist, as the politicians said, then the neighboring countries would fall like a set of dominoes lined up against each other, one after the other after the other. That was the idea. But we're not going to be fish swimming in our water without thinking about it. We're going to think about this, right? What this is actually doing is equating countries and their cultures and their histories, countries as complex and long-standing as China or Korea or Vietnam, simply as game pieces, as dominoes. That's all you need to know. They're just a domino piece. You don't have to know about them. Well, turn that around. How would that feel if a Cambodian thought that about the United States of America? I don't need to understand US history or culture or diversity. It's just like a domino piece. How does that feel? Let's also think about the implication of that. If domino theory is applied to the US, a neighbor of the United States of America is Mexico. Well, we know that Mexico has problems with corruption and the influence of drug cartels in its government. So if we can apply the domino theory to other countries, if we turn it around to us, then we're going to be a drug cartel controlled state within a few years. Yeah? It doesn't sit well, right? It doesn't sit well. This is how we are educated or told to think about ourselves, in this national security mindset within the umbrella of the industrial military education complex. One thing about it is it's easy and comfortable to think this way. It's simple. Hey, the good news is you don't have this much homework to try and read about the history and culture of China. You don't have to do that. You just have to think about a domino piece. That's a lot easier, right? That's much easier on the quiz, right? That's good, right? That's great, right? It also provides a secure sense of self, right? Who you are in opposition to others. That creates a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose. You are educated to think this way. This is what I mean by the national security mindset, its connection to the industrial military education complex. So I've thrown quite a bit of stuff at you, some concepts, some theories, some names of scholars, but luckily this could be said a lot more simply. And it's been said by the British singer Sam Fender in the words, "All the silver-tongued suits and cartoons that rule my world are saying it's a high time for hypersonic missiles." This is what we're being told to think. And this is how we're being told to think about our position in the world. It is a national security mindset, not a human security mindset. Now, contrary to some opinions about what punk rock was all about, it wasn't just about kicking down walls. It was about building things up too. So if we're going to criticize the national security mindset, we have to propose an alternative and that alternative, not national security, is human security. So one of my current roles on this campus, I'm very lucky to be interim director of the Harari Peace Institute. I'm very privileged to have that position. It's a great honor. I think we're doing great stuff. But between you and me, there's times when there's like a bit of bureaucracy involved with it, okay? Like a few emails here, and I got to do this, I got to do that. And you have to get motivated to do that. And so sometimes when I get motivated, I can use the words of Elvis Costello here. What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding, right? And that can move me along. Again, let's not be fish. Let's think about that a bit deeper, okay? What is the agenda that puts forward the idea that peace and love and understanding is funny? Why should there be an agenda to pose it that way? If we're going to have an alternative sense of security, it's going to require a new sense of self and a new understanding of ourselves, not in a national mindset, but in the global mindset. Because, in the words of Bob Marley, when the rain falls, it won't fall on one man's house. Okay. So, how do we go about thinking about this or daring ourselves to work towards something called global peace? So this is a figure from the peace scholar Anthony Adolph. There's a lot going on here, but what I want to focus your attention to is the very top of this figure. Interestingly to me, he puts world peace, or global peace if you want, at the top. But right underneath it, he puts inner peace. Right? Inner peace is right there. In other words, a sense of security within one's self. Right? This is a key here for Adolf. Right? We also need other sorts of peace, corporeal peace, safe minds and bodies, educated in a way that enables peace, safe spaces, safe, secure, just, equitable societies. But the thing to carry with you from this figure is that global peace and inner peace, or a sense of self, are very much tied together. Other forms of peace, we can think about Johann Galtung's form of peace. Three types of peace here, which we can think of from the peace scholar Johann Galtung. He starts off with the idea of negative peace. Now, what negative peace is when the guns stop firing. Okay? At the end of a war, end of a conflict, there's a truce, there's a ceasefire, there's a treaty or whatever, people stop shooting each other. That's good, okay? We should take that as a positive, right? That's good. And, but Galtung says it's not enough, right? And in fact, that type of peace, that type of negative peace, is very much within the ideas of a national security mindset. How do we get to end the war, preferably in our favor? Okay. Galtung says we have to go broader than that, to his idea of positive peace. Positive peace is a social peace of society which is equitable and just, and therefore stable. He says that's what the goal should be. And tied to that, too, is the idea of cultural peace. Right? For Galtung, cultural peace is not labeling others, seeing difference in others, especially seeing others as a threat. That is a bad form of othering. But very interestingly, we can go further than that with Galtung. He actually says that that type of thinking, identifying people that way, others that way, is actually harmful to us as our sense of self. Right? It damages us and our sense of our human worth. These are types of peace we can build. We live in a society of global relations, of global problems. Clearly, global climate change can be one of those. My own particular interests, a potential global war. So these different senses of self, inner peace, world peace, positive peace, cultural peace, must be thought of in terms of a global set of relations. That's what we should dare to walk towards, the pathway we should dare to travel. It's going to be uncomfortable, it's going to be hard, but it's not naive. Okay? It is not naive. Just the very fact that these people have existed in history shows that it's possible. Okay, you're sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, now he wants me to leave this hall and be the new Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, that's a tough ask, right? No, I'm not asking you to do that, okay? But what this does illustrate is that global peace building has happened, continues to happen, and dramatic changes have occurred. Mahatma Gandhi put the idea of imperialism in the trash can of history. Martin Luther King illustrated the racism of society and the way to continually address racism. These are progressive steps in a pathway to building global peace. To get that, to dare to walk that path, you're going to have to face down some myths about peace building. Oh, that's interesting too. Peace and love and understanding is funny. There's an industry to make that a case, and there is an industry trying to create myths about peace building. Wonder why that is. What are those myths, right? Well, one of those myths is that peace building avoids conflict. I know some of you are engaged in certain types of peace building studies on this campus and know that that is a myth, right? Peace building knows that we live in a world of different opinions, of disagreement. We know that. The idea is that we can have a progressive pathway to making solutions to those differences peaceful rather than a matter of conflict. A myth is that peace builders are somehow utopian, that we're going to wave a magic wand and we're going to have a world like the Shire full of hobbits and it's just beautiful, right? We don't think that, okay? We know the world will remain complex, tricky, full of difference, full of disagreement. We understand that. The idea that peace is somehow something that will just happen and be a new state. We know that's not true. We know that peace building is going to be a continual process. There's never a magical end to it. It's always an ongoing process. A myth that peace building is elitist, that some idealists will impose it from above. Well, all successful peace building examples of successful peace building have been from the bottom up, grassroots activity. That's what peace building is. So here's the good news. Again, don't have to leave the hall and be the new Mahatma Gandhi. It's okay, all right? This is how to think about it. The global is in the local. All places are global. Just because we're sitting here in Logan, we can think this is a local place, our local place. But it's connected to the world. We can think of, say, Khartoum as a global place because it's on another continent. But for the people who live in Khartoum, Khartoum is local, right? It is the place they live and their set of global connections. So the good news here is that change at the local scale is global change. Action to being a peace builder at the local scale is enacting global change. That's the good news. There's more good news, okay? You don't need to do it alone, okay? We have, with the generosity of Dr. Mehdi Haravi, a peace institute on campus, the Haravi Peace Institute. It is probably the coolest thing that I've experienced in my career, to have established a peace institute, be part of that process. It gets even better. Often when you hear the word institute in a university, it's the kind of organization that is meant to keep people like me away from people like you, right? So I can disappear and go and think my great thoughts without being bugged by you wondering what's on the quiz on Wednesday, right? The good news about this institute is the exact opposite of that, okay? It is for you. It is to engage undergraduate students and take those initial steps to becoming a peace builder. That's what's cool about it. Okay. It will require personal change, right? Just that inner peace, world peace kind of connection. So I alluded to you at the very beginning that I'd been doing a job before I went to university. Okay, let's get details. That job was, I was a police officer in the London police force. I was a police constable in the Metropolitan Police Force. A police force that has been designated, I would say quite correctly, as institutionally racist and, for good measure, misogynist. Okay? An institutionally racist and misogynist police force. I have no doubt about that. I was a member of that police force. Okay? I still have scars through that experience. Luckily, I got out. Okay? There were an awful lot of punk rock records telling me, get out, and I listened to them, and I got out. Okay? But it remains, right? It's a constant process of challenging oneself and becoming a particular type of person. It's a moment of opportunity in which we face where we live in a scary global context, okay? We need to rethink the land-grant mission of our university, and we have an institute on campus to help us become peace builders. It's a very positive time. Now, you may be up here thinking, oh, look at him, right? Here he is. He's made his career as a professor. He's lived in the United States of America. The accent may give me away that I'm not originally from these parts. Isn't he biting the hand that feeds, right? Isn't that easy for him to say this? So there is another, if you're not interested in the subject matter of this talk, there's also another take-home lesson. Don't put a biting eel close to your nose, okay? There's also that message too, okay? But also, there's this question, right? Who am I to be critical? Am I in a privileged position to be critical? Am I biting the hand that feeds? And I would resort or return to the words of giants that have come way before me to say that's not the case. I use here the words of James Baldwin, who says, I love America more than any other country in the world. And exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. We are privileged fish, if you like, right? We have the right, the ability, perhaps the duty to constantly think about the water in which we swim, the type of society in which we live, and try to make it a better society. Or, in the words of the author Barbara Kingsolver, I've been won to the side of school teachers and nurses and lost all allegiance to plastic explosives. Or perhaps in my own personal pathway, I've lost all allegiance to truncheons and riot shields. It's a personal pathway of change. It's important now because I fear for this country in some ways. I fear for a country that sees might as right, whether that be in domestic politics or foreign politics. I fear for a country about how we think about ourselves in a very simple way, as acting in the name of all humankind in a world of simple right and wrong in which we're the good people, and in which force, violence, those weapons built through research in universities, through the industrial military education complex, are the tools to solve problems of force. I worry about that. I'd say it's a different way to engage the world, an opportunity to take a very different pathway, a pathway to dare to challenge that national security mindset and dare to walk a pathway towards global peace. And this is the opportunity, as President Cantwell has said, we need to rethink the mission of the land-grant university. So the lettering in white is from that original 1862 language. I've been egotistical enough to add some words in red, okay? So, sufficient military tactics for self-defense. Now, we could have a whole series of lectures and classes about, well, what is self-defense? And as a geographer, more importantly, where in the world do we fight in the name of self-defense? But let's just stick with that for a moment. The point being, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? I'm not erasing or eradicating that connection. But I do think we need to think about it, right? And perhaps the word self-defense is key to that, right? As we go down, retain the idea from the original language. Okay, working classes is archaic. Maybe I should have changed that, right? But it should be an accessible education. And it should still be liberal or humanities-based, social science-based, because that is a practical education, an important set of skills. And here it is. What are those skills for? Skills that enables personal development, the acquisition of peace-building skills based on global relations, and the need to empathize and interact with other cultures, natures, and religions for the good of common humanity. In other words, a land-grant mission, a curriculum in which you engage on a regular basis about peace and dare to become peace builders along that pathway. Well, I hope it's not a last lecture for sort of existential reasons, but also I enjoy teaching, okay? And so maybe as we sort of wind this up, let's think about some other words here. These are from Joe Strummer, one of the founders of The Clash. I like this song. I love this line. Well, so long liberty, or maybe we could substitute peace. So long peace, let's forget you didn't show. Not in my time. Not in my generation's time as an academic, as one of many academics who are embedded in higher establishments of higher education based on the industrial military education complex. We didn't do it. But in our sons and daughters' times, or in our students' times, peace, if you get the feeling, give us a call, and we'll make room for you. I find that inspiring. And I find it inspiring precisely around the establishment of the Harari Peace Institute, that we actually have that room that we can make for our students to think about being peace builders. And I think that that's an important imperative for me. What's it going to entail? Don't stay comfortable. Don't settle for normal. Strive to be critical. Dare to know what you're being told. In other words, be really critical fish. Okay? Think about that water you're swimming in. That quote about fish is a little unfair because sometimes fish really think about the water they're swimming in. If it's getting hotter than they're used to or colder than they're used to, they really have to think about the water. And maybe we're in a time where our water is really changing, right? Our society is changing, and it's really imperative that we think critically about it. So I dare you there to make positive change, but don't feel like you need to do it alone. What's it going to require? Personal change. You're going to have to give some of yourself up. You're going to have to be vulnerable. You're going to have to be positive. Because, in the words of the Smiths, if it's not love, then it's the bomb that will bring us together. So think about the water and don't fear swimming against the tide. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Flint. Before we close, I would like to invite Morgan Cole. You stay right there. Maggie Mace, Jackson Morley, Carly Prinster, and Jacob Sagers, who are the co-chairs and members of the Honors Last Lecture Selection Committee, to come on stage and present Dr. Flint with the 2023 Honors Outstanding Professor Award, as well as a memento of his talk today.
Okay. Thank you. See, I told you you made a mistake. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It means an awful lot to me. I really do appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Maggie. Thank you. Thanks. You're going to get a picture. Okay, so I got to put these above my head or something?
I think,
Okay.
I think you could show him the award, show him the picture the audience might want to see there. So that's just
There we
a
go.
commemorative thing for the occasion.
Thank you.
So
Thank you
congratulations,
much.
Dr. Flint, on this well-deserved recognition, and thank you all for attending the 48th Annual Honors Last Lecture. Please join us in the lobby for a reception and the opportunity to talk with Dr. Flint, to ask him questions, find out more about how to get involved in peace building if you're willing to take that dare. So I look forward to seeing you at the reception. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. That's quite a thing you got there, right?